Hi everyone, welcome to 8x Pixel Expo 8 monthly webinar global webcast October series. Happening every 8th of the month. This is a session where we come together to over a united cause, which is our love for diving and also for the ocean. So in conjunction with the World Octopus Day, we like to kick off this day with a particular session, but of course we're not talking about octopus. We are going to be talking about gobies. So the title of this session is called Why I Love Gobies and Why You Should Too. And before we proceed further, I'd like to introduce the speaker of this session. So we have here Dr. Klaus M. Stiefel. Hi, Dr. Klaus.
Hello.
So maybe let me just introduce who is Dr. Klaus. Dr. Klaus is an underwater photographer and videographer based in the Philippines. Australian by birth, but a citizen of the ocean by heart. He has dived and photographed in California, Japan, Australia, Indonesia, Micronesia, and also the Philippines. Klaus is also a technical diving instructor and a published popular science author. Klaus teaches fish and coral reef biology as an adjunct professor at the Institute of Environmental and Marine Sciences at Silliman University on the Philippines. And his main research interests are the biodiversity and the behavior of gobies. So a family of small marine and freshwater fishes as well. So I'm sure everybody's excited to know a little bit more about gobies. Herewith, without any further ado, let me just pass over the session to Dr. Klaus. Dr. Klaus, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here. Really excited to meet all of you. So I'm not joking. I do love gobies. So a lot of divers are in love with these large, gigantic fishes, with sharks, manta rays, and I enjoy observing these too. But gobies are something special to me. And why are they special? They condense so much of marine biology, evolutionary biology, and biodiversity into this one family of fishes. And I will show you some pictures in the next 30 minutes, and I will tell you about these gobies. And I hope at the end of the talk, I've convinced you that gobies are just amazing. Amazing in terms of their biology, as well as amazing in terms of their beauty. So, this is an example. This is a small specimen of a gobi, a trimmer. I took that photograph in Okinawa in Japan, and look at these blotches. Look at this metallic blue. This saturated red. Like, do you have any shark which has such color? Of course not, right? So, the beauty is really one thing. And obviously, I've pointed out already, gobies are extremely small. So then this is a specimen of a gobi of the genus Eviota, and it's sitting on an encrusting coral. So if you're an avid scuba diver, you have probably seen this kind of coral many times, and then you have probably observed tiny little shadows racing around on these corals. This gobi is less than 2 centimeters in length, and actually it's one of the smallest vertebrate species. So vertebrates are, of course, animals with a backbone, like amphibians, reptiles, mammals, birds. And, vertebrates, of course, grow up to 30 meters, the blue whale. And so this would be the largest vertebrate. But then, the gobies are among the smallest. They're actually tied with some other fishes, and they're very small frogs and chameleons, interestingly also. But the gobies are essentially right up there with the smallest. And this is a unique challenge for the biology of these fishes. So this is another very small gobi of the genus Eviota. You can see, this is this encrusting coral here. You see this one filament of a filamentous algae. These are sand grains. So, the head of this gobi is really only the size of a few sand grains. How, as a biological developmental program, how do you even make such a small animal? There are many challenges. So there are some gobies which are what's called pedomorphic. So they are essentially, they do not complete their development to a complete adult animal. They get stuck in a juvenile, in a child phase, and then they become reproductively active. So, biology had to pull all kinds of tricks to be able to make these tiny gobies function. Interestingly, this is another very small goby. So this is another encrusting coral here. This is one coral polyp, what you can see here. So this whole, you've probably seen these coral polyps. They're really only, they're less than the size of a pinky fingertip. And this whole goby fits on there. And, several other gobies would fit next to it on a single coral polyp. So this just shows how extremely tiny these animals are. Now, with the small size comes something else that's really interesting. And this is, there's a very short lifespan. So some of these very small gobies only live about 8 weeks. And so what, a lifespan, which in a human is, approximately 80 years, would in this animal only be about 8 weeks. Now, just to put that in a context, if we take, the beginning of this unfortunate COVID pandemic, which is about 2 years ago, that would be as many generations as it took us in humans since the Middle Ages. So, the goby, which was alive at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, is as far away from the current gobies in terms of generation as you and me are away from, the medieval knights, which would, ride around Europe in big armor. So, these extremely short generation times, they make it very crucial for this fish to grow quickly, and then when they've grown, to reproduce quickly. So while each individual goby is actually very small because of their fast growth, and because of their huge numbers, the biomass of gobies is actually significant. And so they are a crucial link between the tiny crustaceans which populate the water column and the benthos on a coral reef, the ground. They're a crucial link between these and larger fish, wrasses, sand perches, which are then again eaten, by animals higher up in the food chain, like snappers, groupers, and eventually sharks. So a lot of biological energy and biomass from algae and corals and tiny crustaceans actually moves through gobies. So while they're insignificant in size as individual fish, they're very significant when we're looking at the whole ecosystem. So fascinating aspects, right? We've already seen very small sizes. We have seen very short lifespans, and we've seen an important role in the ecosystem of these gobies. Now, this is a Valenciana Pelosita. This is a sand-living goby. I included this picture because of the amazing pattern of these fishes. So, what's the purpose of this? It's probably for these fish to recognize each other. And it might also be to distract predatory fishes. So this is what originally, as an underwater photographer, drew me to the gobies. This extreme, psychedelic beauty. This is like a wallpaper from the 1960s. In some kind of psychedelic art house. And so, this is really why it's such a pleasure to photograph these gobies. Now, many gobies have very striking colorations, but if we look at them underwater, this is actually a great camouflage. So maybe you can guess what this structure is, what this goby is sitting on. And I will tell you, it's a sponge. It's one of these large, floppy elephant ear sponges, which you've probably seen many times underwater. I took this picture in Mactan in the Cebu province in the Philippines. And this goby is probably about 2.5 centimeters long. It's very difficult to spot it. Unless you know that these live on these sponges, it's almost impossible to find them. And you can see that both the color of the fish matches the color of the host sponge, and also the pattern matches. So the distance between these ridges on the sponge pretty much matches the distance between the larger blotches on the goby. So what we have here, the sponge evolved to have a certain kind of pattern, the color, and the goby followed. So we have a phenomenon which is called co-evolution. So again, we have a really important principle in evolutionary biology, which is very well illustrated in the gobies. So, this is another example where gobies live with large marine animals. So this is a gobiodon, which they're actually fairly common. And this gobiodon lives in a hard coral. You really have to look very carefully as an underwater photographer to find these. And then, they would hide deep in between the coral fins. Very interestingly, they defend the hard coral hosts. So if there's a seaweed which is trying to overgrow this hard coral and essentially steal its sunlight, what the goby will do, it will specifically eat that seaweed, so to defend its coral home. So what we have here, we have a symbiosis. There is a mutualistic relationship between the coral and the goby. Again, we have a very important concept in ecology, symbiosis, and this concept is very, very represented among the gobies. So essentially, you can study marine biology only by studying gobies. Think about that. Now, this is another very well camouflaged goby. This is a Pleurositia goby, and it's on an encrusting coral again. A very good example of co-evolution of the hosts and the color of the goby which lives there. These gobies would hatch. They would then live for a few weeks as a larva in the water column. Then they would find one of these columns to settle, and then they would not leave that coral for the whole life. So they're obligatory. It's obligatory for them to live on these corals. Fascinating to me. Now, this is my favorite goby topic. So gobies already are my favorite fish, and then this is my favorite topic among these favorite fish. So you can see this goby here, and it's a so-called shrimp goby. Now, what is it doing? It's sitting here in the sand, and you can see this shrimp, which is digging a burrow, and it's a good engineer. So it used this dead sea urchin, and then this plate, I believe, is part of a dead coral. It used this to construct an arch. Really not unlike like a Romantic church in Europe, where the stones are tied up in this way that they provide a stable arch over an entrance. Now, the shrimp digs a burrow. The shrimp is not completely blind, but it has very poor eyesight. So the shrimp would not dare to venture outside if not for the goby. The goby has very good eyesight for such a small fish, and it's perching at the entrance, and you can see the shrimp here touches the dorsal fin of the goby. If there is a predatory fish coming by, the goby would see it, and the goby would conduct a so-called tail flick reflex. And this tail flick reflex is a warning to the shrimp. So it says, something is approaching. You better stay in the burrow to stay safe. And then, they would stop doing that tail flick when the predatory fish had passed. And so essentially, it's a trade-off of the shrimp digging and the goby acting as a watchman. I have, with a small grant from an institution called Two Photon Art, I set up a web page called the Shrimp Goby page, unsurprisingly. And there's a lot of, if you Google that, you will find that there's a lot of information about shrimp gobies. This is another example. So this is a slightly different shrimp goby. This is a different shrimp. The shrimp all belong to one family, the alphaid shrimps. And again, you can see how the shrimp is touching the back of the goby, the dorsal fin. So there is a lot. There are about 120 of these shrimp gobies, and there are more than 100 of these shrimp. And they're very complicated rules. Who wants to collaborate with whom? And depending on the depth, depending on the species of goby, the species of shrimp. Super fascinating. There are still many results coming out. Now, I collaborated with a very talented artist here in the Philippines, Miss Guerra Guinto, and she drew a cartoon explaining this. So here, I believe this might be the only goby cartoon in existence. So here, the shrimp is digging and it's working on this burrow, and the goby is just sitting there, and the shrimp is complaining the goby is lazy. And then a predatory fish, or worse, approaches. And in this case, I think that's supposed to be me. At that point, I still had longer hair. We were just chatting about that. And there's a camera here. And the shrimp is looking out of the burrow onto this alien monster. And it's safe because the goby warned it. And so now, the shrimp has made up its mind. The goby is such a friend. He warns me of predatory fish and bizarre looking giant aliens, underwater photographers. So that you can also find the cartoon on the shrimp goby page. Now, how am I doing with time? I think okay, right? So we also did a scientific study with two very talented mathematicians from the US, Joel Nansittel and Bart Ehrmantraut, where we looked at the communication system. So there is, the normal response of a fish in response to a threat would just be to turn around and to, swim fast in the other direction. So this is a reflex which is implemented by what's called the Mautner cell, which is a very specific brain cell. And we did simulations to predict how would these brains of these shrimp gobies have to be modified in order to go from this normal fish case where, any kind of threat just leads to a turn and then a fast escape, to a type of behavior where the fish is sitting there and, when a threat approaches, the fish will provide this tail flick reflex. Now, so we found a couple of modifications that some of the swimming centers in these fish have to be reduced in activity, and some connections have to be strengthened. And then this, regular fish brain can be transformed into this fish escape system. This fish warning system where the goby acts as a watchman. Now, I should add, this tail flick reflex is an orange warning. It's an intermediate warning. If a predatory fish comes very close, of course, the fish escapes. The goby would turn around and escape head first into the burrow. And then the fish would wait there for several minutes and, await essentially for the predator to leave. So, this is something we have not tackled experimentally. We have not measured activity in goby brains, but we used knowledge about fish brains, and then we did some hypothetical simulations basically to see how can that change to go from a regular fish, anything, goldfish, trout, almost any fish would have this escape reflex, and how can you modify this escape reflex to create this warning system which this communication system which the shrimp goby conveys to the shrimp. Now, cartoon, a scientific paper, very interesting. There are a lot of freshwater gobies, and particularly on these tropical islands, like on Negros Island in the Philippines, where I'm living. Now, this is a Stiphodon atopoporeus. This is a very pretty goby, which I took this picture in its natural habitat, and the natural habitat, I didn't have to take a dive boat. I had to hike up in the mountains, and then the water was only about chest deep. And then I had to essentially kneel down in this mountain creek and take pictures of this goby. This is a male fish. These freshwater gobies have a very strong difference between female and male animals. Very often the male animals, which essentially have to be attractive and they actually perform this little nuclear dance, this mating display for the females, and they're also excuse me, they are very flamboyantly colored. So the female of this species is brown, and it's actually difficult to distinguish it from other species. Now, this is another freshwater goby from Negros Island. Very interestingly, they live in freshwater as adult fish. But what happens when they hatch from the eggs? So typically the male fish in many gobies is the one guarding the eggs. In this freshwater fish then, freshwater gobies, the egg would hatch, the larval goby would drift downstream, end up in the ocean, spend anywhere from a few weeks to a few months in the ocean, and then when they're big enough, when they're almost adults, find themselves a river delta and migrate upstream. So they have this biphasic life cycle. The early youth they spend in the ocean, and once they're ready to live as adults and to grow and to reproduce, they migrate upriver, and then they live their adult life there. So this has interesting consequences, or actually important consequences. Excuse me. If you build a dam in one of these rivers, it could be a hydroelectric dam or just a dam for irrigation. You're blocking the way for these gobies. So they will not be able to make it from the ocean where they live as larvae to, this high altitude, freshwater rivers. And this is a major environmental issue, that with just building a relatively inconspicuous dam, a downstream in one of these rivers, you can essentially wipe out the goby population upstream. And this is very unfortunate. And, this is something which a lot of city planners don't know. So I'm really trying to get the word out that this is fantastic biodiversity, and these gobies, they deserve a chance to continue living their lives in these rivers. So both of these freshwater gobies I shot in Negros Island. A lot of these Pacific islands, which are not connected to mainland Asia, have gobies in their freshwater streams, and these gobies can settle one island to the next exactly because the larvae live in the ocean, whereas a pure freshwater fish would have a hard time, making it from Thailand to the Philippines, right? Because it would have to cross a large distance of seawater, which they can't. But so these gobies are often the prevalent fauna in some of these freshwater habitats on Pacific islands, also in Hawaii. Hawaii is especially interesting because some of Hawaii's freshwater gobies are essentially, they're expert climbers. They can climb up waterfalls which might be 100 meters in altitude. So tiny fish 5 centimeters in length can climb up 100 meters of a waterfall while underwater. Imagine the athletic skill here. It gets even more extreme. So gobies have made the step on land, like our ancestors, the first amphibians, which then developed into reptiles, which then developed into mammals, made it on land in the Devonian period. Right now, gobies are making this step onto land. So this is a mud skipper, and I'm actually really happy about this shot. It's not easy at all to climb into these mangroves, and then these fish are very shy. You really have to. It's essentially yoga with a camera in a mangrove forest. And then I got a shot of this fish, and I got a number of similar shots. So these gobies, these mud skippers, keep a little bit of water in their gills and under the gill covers, and they can keep extracting oxygen from that water when they're on land. and then they use their tail, the strength in their tail, to propel themselves forward. So these are fish which have really made the step on land. Again, we have so many. This is yet another really interesting aspect, of the land to water transition. Again, it's something we have in Gobies. This is another must clip. I'm also happy about that shot. So, right, you see this nice reflection, and this is the root of a mangrove. Mangrove, also, highly underappreciated ecosystem. They store a lot of carbon. I think people should be aware of that. And they're really very rich biologically, not just gobies, juvenile fish, bird life. So, if you have mangroves where you live, make sure that, there's no ugly coastal development being put on top of them. Now, more Gobi things. I am excited that I just signed a great book contract with Asian Geographic, edX, about, to get this book out, The Lives of Gobies. And, this is a lot of my insights about gobies written for, an interested lay audience. It's not a scientific monograph. And there are a lot of pictures over the years which I took of gobies. So it's coming out in the next few months. Keep your eyes open. Also, if you like gobies, I mentioned my shrimp goby page, and I have a YouTube channel, and all of this goes under Pacific Klaus, Pacific like the ocean, Klaus like my last name, easy to remember. So on that channel, there's a lot of goby content. There's also other stuff. Here I have a triggerfish and a turtle, but there's a big focus on gobies. So I hope that was interesting. Definitely gobies are interesting to me. I hope this was contagious, and contact me if you have any questions about gobies, photographing them, questions about their biology. So again, many thanks for having me. Exciting to be here. Hopefully things will normalize. I'll be able to go to Singapore myself in person, but this was a close second best. And so, thank you. Back to Nora.
Thank you so much, Dr. Klaus. Those gobies are so cute, not to mention.
Absolutely. Very cute, right? Big eyes, almost like a comic character. That's why we made this cartoon. I should really get in touch with my friend. She just moved to Manila, and probably that cartoon needs a sequel.
Yes, indeed. So I would just like to add on to what Dr. Klaus have shared with regards to the upcoming Asian Geographic latest book with Dr. Klaus called The Lives of Gobies. And that particular book, you can actually do your pre-order reserve your copy now. I will drop the link to reserve this copy on the Facebook comment. So you can just go ahead and, book as many as you want. And all I can tell you is that it surely is going to be a good gift for the holidays, like for those who love nature. Go and grab one and, look at how cute gobies are. Why not, right? So everybody that's tuning in, I also like to share that please do stay tuned to the next session, which is happening shortly with Gareth Locke, where we will be having this continuation on A to Z human factors in diving. So this part 2 installment will cover the remaining alphabets, which is N and also to Z. So that is 8:30 p.m. And do stay tuned. It's just like, a couple of minutes more. And once again, Dr. Klaus, thank you so much. I've learned a lot. The last time I heard about gobies was really a while ago when I was in school. And it's really nice to be refreshed about what's the difference between gobies and mud skippers. All right. Thank you so much. And we will see you. Bye.
Bye.